In June, amid the golden fields, I saw a groundhog laying dead. Dead lay he, my senses shook, and mind outshook with naked fertility. There lowly in the vigorous summer, its form began in a senseless change, and made my senses waver dim. Seeing nature in ferocious as him, inspecting close his maggots' might, and seething cauldron of being, hath loathing, hath with strange love. I poked him with an angry stick. The fever rose, began a flame, and vigor circumskies the skies, immense energy in the sun, and through the frame, a sun's trembling, my stick had done nor good nor harm. Then I stood silent in the day, watching the object, and I had done before, and kept reverence for my knowledge, trying to control to be still, to quell the passion for blood, until I had bent down onto my knees, praying for joy in sight of decay. And so I left, and I returned, in awe strict of the eye, to see the sap gone out of the groundhog, but the bony, sodden hulk remained. But the year had lost its meaning in intellectual chains. I lost both love and loathing, murred up in the wall of wisdom. Another summer took in the fields again, massive burning, full of life, when I chanced upon the spot, and there was only little hair left, and the bones bleaching in the sunlight, beautiful as architecture. I watched them like a geometer. A walking stick from a birch. It had been 3 years now. There's no sign of the groundhog. No. I stood there in the whirling summer, my hand capped with the withered heart. I thought of China and Greece, of Alexander in the tent, and Montague in his tower, of Saint Teresa in her wild lament.
Our poem was The Groundhog by Richard Eberhardt. So for Soapstone, the speaker is a man who's experiencing a mental and emotional progression. He's just kind of maturing and realizing things about life in general. The occasion is that the man comes across a dead groundhog, and he kind of learns about mortality. The audience, not applicable. Purpose, to teach that no matter who you are, death is inevitable and there's nothing you can do to escape it or change it. The subject is mortality/death, and the tone is reflective, and at first it's melancholy, but it gets a little bit more lighthearted, and towards the end it's hopeful. In June, amid the golden fields, I saw a groundhog lying dead. There's kind of a contrast in tone, because when it says amid the golden fields, you're expecting an enlightening, uplifting kind of poem, but then it says, I saw a groundhog lying dead. Dead lay he, my senses shook, and mind outshot our naked frailty. So groundhog is obviously going to be a symbol, which we figure out is a symbol for death. And also groundhogs, is the animal that supposedly comes out of the hole, and the whole spring thing, and that's just spring represents rebirth and everything, so that could be a symbol that the symbol that represents rebirth is dead. Naked frailty is kind of showing vulnerability or being afraid, so the man's afraid of death. And when he says my senses shook, he's making this realization, and he's kind of shocked and just coming to his senses about death of humans. There lowly in the vigorous summer, his form began its senseless change, and made my senses waver dim, seeing nature ferocious in him. And when he says his senses wavered dim, he became really gloomy and full of despair when he started thinking about death. And seeing nature ferocious in him, it's kind of saying that nature's evil, for making people and animals have to die. Inspecting close his maggots' might, and seething cauldron of his being, half with loathing, half with a strange love. I poked him with an angry stick, and that's the stick is kind of a symbol for trying to make a change about death. The fever arose, became a flame, and vigor circumscribed the skies, immense energy in the sun, and through my frame is sunless trembling. Vigor's capitalized because it's personifying it. But this last part was kind of ironic, because it's saying that the dead groundhog has the fever rising in him, and immense like sun like energy, while the man who's actually alive is sunless. The stick had done nor good nor harm, so that's showing that he has like no impact, like he can't do anything about it, so he's feeling helpless. Then stood I silent in the day, watching the object as before, and kept my reverence for knowledge, trying for control to be still, to quell the passion of the blood until I had bent down on my knees, praying for joy in the sight of decay. So he's basically he watches the groundhog all day and observes him, and he's like contemplating life and death and just trying to like calm himself down because he's in a state of like disbelief, and he's like trying to cheer himself up despite his sad situation and watching the groundhog slowly decay. And so I left, and I returned in autumn, strict of eye, to see the sap gone out of the groundhog, but the bony, sodden hulk remained. So he comes back the next year in autumn, and the groundhog's carcass is remaining. But the year had lost its meaning, and in intellectual chains I lost both love and loathing, mirrored up in the wall of wisdom. So in the past year since he's last visited the groundhog, which was his first time, he's kind of like maturing a little bit, because he's kind of like coming to his senses, saying like, okay, I'm gonna have to die. So his feelings are kind of neutralizing, like he's not going crazy anymore about it like how he was in the beginning. Another summer took the fields again, massive and burning, full of life, but when I chanced upon the spot, there was only a little hair left, and bones bleaching in the sunlight, beautiful as architecture. I watched them like a geometer, and cut a walking stick from a birch. So this time he comes back again the next summer, and now the groundhog is like basically gone, and he says it's beautiful as architecture. So now he's realizing like that the nature of life is beautiful, and that it's like beautiful how life goes and just the whole circle of life, and he barely has any reaction to it. So he's definitely come a long way and just come to terms with himself and has accepted that death is inevitable. It has been 3 years now, so 3 years have gone by, and that's how long it's taken him. There's no sign of the groundhog. I stood there in the whirling summer, my hand capped a withered heart, and thought of China and of Greece, of Alexander in his tent, of Montaigne in his tower, of Saint Teresa in her wild lament. So he's like, these examples at the bottom are like these great, powerful, rich people who have died and like are still honored after their death. So he's kind of like using examples. He's like, oh, well, if all of these people who are so rich and powerful died too, like everyone has to die, like even if you're powerful and famous and considered great. So overall, this poem is just a man, and he's realizing that life has to come to an end at some point. Death is going to come no matter what you do and no matter who you are.